So at the very beginning of our Torah reading, there was a description of the sacrificial offerings brought forward on the first day after Moses finished setting up the tabernacle in the desert. Obviously, it was a time for great celebration. The tabernacle was now fixed in the desert. They had their center of worship. And so offerings were brought. The one who presented his offering on the very first day was a name that we're very familiar with, Nachshon, the son of Aminadav, from the tribe of Judah. Nachshon is the one who entered into the Sea of Reeds, into the Red Sea, and according to tradition, the waters went up to his neck and then went up to his nostrils. He took the next step, and the sea split. So maybe that's the reason he got the honor. And the Torah details the offering. It was a silver bowl weighing 130 shekels, a silver basin of shekels by the sanctuary weight, both filled with flour, with oil mixed in for a meal offering, one gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, one bull from the herd, one ram, one lamb not yet a year old for a burnt offering, one for a sin offering, and for a sacrifice of well-being, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 yearling lambs, and a partridge in a pear tree. Okay? That's the offering. I mean, he must have had to bring his whole family to schlep it. It was an enormous amount. But it's interesting to see what kind of offering they brought to the tabernacle in ancient times to express their thanksgiving to God for all the goodness he had bestowed upon them. But then comes a description of what the second tribe offered on the next day. And it turns out to be exactly the same as was offered on the first day. Then comes a description of the third tribe, which turns out to be exactly what was offered on the first day. And then comes the fourth tribe, exactly as you guessed it, what the first tribe had offered, etc., etc., for 89 verses. 89 verses, exactly the same, except the change in the name. So what's going on here? Why couldn't the Torah have recorded what the first tribe gave and then just say the other tribes, and list their names, offered the same gifts? So instead of 87 verses, maybe we'd have about 15 verses. We know the Torah is very careful in its choice of words. It does not waste words. It took less words to describe the gift of the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai, which we just celebrated the other day, than it did to describe these sacrifices over and over and over again. So why would the Torah list the gifts of each of the tribes, even though the gifts are identical, and nearly bore us out of our skin? Why didn't the Torah just say, etc., etc., or one verse summary for the rest of the gifts? One thing is obvious. The Torah knew we would ask this question. Every Torah reader looks and says, why am I reading this over and over again? But then it's an easier aliyah to read because it repeats itself. There's no other chapter quite like this one in the entire Torah. And as you can imagine, there are a lot of different explanations that have been offered as an answer to this question. So let me share one with you that I learned from my teacher, Rabbi Jack Reamer. It comes from a story about Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan Spector. He was one of the giants of Jewish life in Europe before the Holocaust. His name might be familiar. He's so great that the Rabbinical School of Yeshiva University in New York is named for him. The story is this. He was once asked, as a great rabbi, to adjudicate a case, a very complicated case, one that involved thousands of rubles. The rabbi didn't want to take responsibility for deciding such a complicated case by himself, so he created a beit din, a court, to hear the case with him. Since it was such a complicated case, He chose a Beit Din of very distinguished scholars who came from different cities to sit with Rabbi Elchanan on this Beit Din. When they arrived, he gave them time to unpack and rest. And then he called the Beit Din into session to hear the arguments of both sides, to examine the Talmudic sources that related to the case. And just as they were about to begin the proceedings, someone comes knocking at the door. Rabbi Spector opens the door, and the man said, "I'm sorry to have to interrupt you, but I was sure you would want to hear the good news. Chaim has been released. The accusations against him were false. The accusers have been jailed, and Chaim is innocent." Case over. Rabbi Spector's face lit up with joy and excitement. He hugged the man who brought him the news, and he said, "Really, thank you so much. Thank you so much. What wonderful news." Then he questioned the man about all the details. The Beit Din listened. He gave him some refreshments. He sent him on his way. The Beit Din sat down again to do the proceedings, when suddenly someone else came knocking at the door. The man said, "Rabbi, I have to interrupt you. I was sure you would want to hear the good news. Chaim has been released from jail. It turned out the accusations against him were false. The accusers have been jailed." And Rabbi Spector's face lit up with joy and excitement. He hugged the man who brought him such good news. "Really, thank you so much for the good news. I'm so grateful." And he questioned him about all the details, and he offered him some refreshments. And the court sat down again to finish its proceedings. And a few minutes later, there was another knock at the door, and a man came in. He said, "Rabbi, I hate to interrupt you, etc., etc. Chaim has been released from jail. The accusations against him were false." And Rabbi Spector was so joyous, and he said, "Really, thank you. I'm so grateful." By this time, the members of the Beit Din are kind of staring at him, really confused. And so they said to him, "Rabbi, can you explain to us what's going on here? Why have you treated every single person who came in here to bring you this news as if he was the first one? Why have you pretended to be so surprised and so happy, so grateful every time one of them came in here? Even though you already knew the whole story. We knew the whole story. Let's get on with our work. What's going on here?" Rabbi Spector gave this explanation. Each one of these people who came in here today came in here in order to make me happy by bringing me some really good news about Chaim. Can you imagine how disappointed they would have felt? Can you imagine how crushed they would have been if I said to them, "I know that already. I heard all about it"? If I had said that, I would have ruined their day. If I had given them that kind of brush off, they would have hesitated to do in the future the same mitzvah. This way, by treating each one as if he were the first one, by thanking each one for the good deed they did, I encourage them to feel good about themselves, to feel good that it's good to do such a mitzvah. And if technically I lied by pretending not to know, so I lied. The Kadosh Baruch Hu forgive me for lying if by doing so I made another person happy. End of story. Now we start to understand why the Torah lists the gifts that were brought by every single tribe, instead of saying, etc., etc., etc. Nobody wants to be known as etc. They want their name to be known. Because the Torah does not want the tribes who came after the first one to feel as if their gifts had less significance than the first tribe's gifts had. The Torah did not want to diminish the values of the gifts of each of the 12 tribes by lumping them all together. Just as Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan did not want to diminish the good feelings of those who came to him with good news. After the first person had come. Now, I have a very extensive email list with friends, lots of colleagues, lots of congregants. It happens from time to time that I either get the same story or joke from numerous people on the same day or even a few days later. You know that, how a joke starts and then it circulates like crazy over and over again. Or maybe a really good article that they thought I would like to read. I remember at first I would write and say, thanks, I already got that one. But then I noticed something. I would suddenly not get any more stories or jokes from that person. And I realized why. They were very excited to share something with me that they thought I might enjoy, or even more importantly, something I could use to teach, to give a Dvar Torah, or even use in a sermon. But when I said I already had it, they felt they were kind of unimportant. They were miyutar, we say in Hebrew. Just another one of many that writes to the rabbi. And they weren't really helping me or contributing to my writings. So they reached a point, why bother? He's got that material. He heard that joke already. He saw that article for sure. What can I contribute, they figured. The rabbi probably gets all that way before I even think of sending it to him. So I was not only taking away from their joy and sense of accomplishment that they contributed something that I didn't know, but I was discouraging them from helping me in the future. Surely there will times when they will be the only ones to send that particular article or joke or story, and then I will miss out on something important. So I decided to change my approach. I always thank the person and let them think that they were the first or the only ones to share it with me. Because you know what? Sometimes they really are the first and only ones to share it with me. And if they are not, I still appreciate so much that they're thinking of me and want to share with me, and I want them to have that sense of appreciation and keep that material flowing. Now, after hearing the story of Rabbi Elchanan from Rabbi Remer, I realized the importance of what I had decided to do. And I came to understand the real lesson of what appears to be the most boring chapter in the entire Torah. And it's really a very simple lesson. Nothing fancy, nothing philosophical, and yet we should hear it well. The lesson is that we should be careful and sensitive to the feelings of others. The lesson is that we should do whatever we can do to make certain that other people, especially those who mean well, should feel good about themselves. And the lesson is that the purpose of studying Torah is to teach us how to be mensch. Everything else is extra. The lesson is that everyone's presence, as well as everyone's presence, is very valuable to us as a community, as a synagogue, as a family. Every simcha, every bar and bat mitzvah, everyone who comes to learn, everyone who contributes, to be part of something, a shul, a community, a family, is important, and it's important that they feel that way. And only we can make them feel that way. And we need to do that in our families and with our friends and our communities. That's the lesson of the minyan. Each and every person in that group of 10 is equally important. Because if any of them leaves, the minyan's over. The community can't continue with its prayer service or with its business. We all know how important it is to encourage children when they do something good, even if it be something very, very small. We still make a big deal out of it because we want them to continue to do good things and feel appreciated. So, what do we learn? We learn that many people do acts of kindness for us. And the other is that when they do, treat each one just as gratefully as you do the first. Say to each one, thank you. Thank you. It was good of you to think of me and to do that. Say that even if you don't really need the favor that they do for you. Even if someone has already done it for you. Say it just the same. For if we remember to do that, how proud and how happy we will make the people who do those nice things for us, how proud and how happy we will be. You know the famous answer to the question, what are the 3 best ways to teach? By example, and by example. Where there's a similar answer to the question, what are the 3 most important rules of life? The first is to be kind, the second is to be kind, and the third is to be kind. That's the lesson of this supposedly most boring chapter of the Torah. Right there is what on the surface is the most boring chapter in the Torah, is perhaps the Torah's greatest lesson, which teaches us one more important lesson, and that is we can learn something important even from the most unlikely source, the most unanticipated source. If we can learn this lesson, if we can learn that these rules, and if we keep them in mind, then ours will be a good and blessed year, a good and blessed life. And as the prayer book says, we will find favor in the sight of God and in the sight of humankind, as the chiefs of the 12 tribes did, when each and every one of them, with joy and with pride, brought their gifts in this week's Torah portion, and each and every name has been listed for us for eternity to remember their gifts, their appreciation, and their love of what God had done by taking them out of Egypt, bringing them into the desert for them to build a community that would eventually enter the land of Israel and establish the nation state of the Jewish people. Shabbat Shalom.